Okay, so question 12, we have to determine the domain and range of this function. So just a reminder of the basic version of a square root graph. So y is equal to the square root of x. So this is a graph that starts from 0 and it increases from left to right. But the key thing here is if we have a square root, so we have here the square root of 4x plus 1, whatever is under the square root can never be negative. You can never square root a negative number. So for example, if you try square root negative 2, you'll see that you get an error on your calculator. So we're trying to find what is the biggest domain of x that will work for this function. So we just got to keep in mind that whatever's under the square root can never be negative. So in other words, we want 4x plus 1 to always be greater than or equal to 0, but never negative. So now we're just going to get x on its own and see what the domain of x will be. So we take the 1 to the other side. So 4x is greater than or equal to negative 1. And then we divide both sides by 4. So x has to be greater than or equal to negative a quarter. So in other words, if we sub in values of x greater than or equal to negative a quarter, that will make sure that this value under the square root is always positive. So for example, values greater than negative a quarter are like 1, 2, 0, etc. And if you sub those in here, you'll see that you do get positive values under the square root. So this is the domain. These are the values of x that do give us positive values under the square root, or 0. And now we need to find the range of this graph. So if you take note that for these square root graphs, they are never negative, but their lowest value is at 0 for y. So y equals 0. So you'll notice that for this graph, if you take negative a quarter, the lowest x value in this domain, and you do sub it in place of this x, you're going to get 4 times negative a quarter, which is negative 1, plus 1, which is 0. And if you square root 0, you get 0. So in other words, at negative a quarter, we get a y of 0. So if we draw this graph, so at negative a quarter is about here, negative a quarter, the y is 0, so it's on the x-axis. That is where your y is equal to 0. And then with the square root graphs, they always just look like this for what we're going to be working with. So then from negative a quarter, this graph is just going to increase from left to right. So this is going to look like that. So in other words, all the y values that are now on this graph, all of these y values are all greater than or equal to y equals 0. So that is going to be the range of this graph. So the range, all of the y values on this blue curve, all of those y values are greater than 0, or they could be equal to 0. For example, at negative a quarter. So that is the answer for question 12.